Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing before the western gate of a small medieval town with cold stones sweating under your palm, damp straw clinging to your boots, smoke caught in the rafters of the low houses beyond the wall, and distant bells trembling through the river mist. Torchlight wavers in the wind, a horse snorts nearby, its breath white in the winter air, while mud grips your soles as if the road has grown fond of you. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. Though admittedly the brochures were mostly monks drawing tiny towers in the margins, you pull your cloak tighter and accept the gentle reality check that you probably would not last a week out here, not with these roads, these smells, and this suspiciously personal relationship everyone has with fleas. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the gatekeeper squints at you as though you owe him a toll from 3 lifetimes ago, comment where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge beneath the gate arch as the last light slips behind the fields, and the town closes around you. A boy too old to be called a child and too young to be trusted with ale drags a wooden bar across the entrance. No one can quite agree whether this town is safer inside the walls or merely better at trapping its own smells, but the people seem grateful for the barrier all the same. Outside, the road sinks into darkness between willow trees and frozen ditches. Inside, the lanes twist between timber houses, their beams blackened by smoke, their windows shuttered, their thresholds brushed with rushes and old straw. You keep your head low, because the wind slips through every seam of your cloak. The wool is wet at the hem, and the scent of it follows you, sour and familiar, like every journey you have ever regretted taking after sunset. Somewhere behind you, a thin dog with one torn ear begins to follow, not begging exactly, just making a patient argument with its feet. It trots 3 paces back, pauses when you pause, and pretends this is coincidence. Some swear such dogs can smell a traveller's loneliness. Others say they simply know who is most likely to drop bread. The town is not large, but at dusk it feels deep. Smoke pours from roof holes and chimney pots. A woman lifts a bucket from a yard well and watches you pass without smiling. The bells from the little parish church ring for evening prayer, their sound softened by mist and thatch. A baker marks a loaf with a thumbprint before sliding it into a basket, and a cart horse shakes rein from its mane like a disappointed lord. You have come for shelter, and perhaps for news, because the road ahead bends through forest where people speak too eagerly of wolves, robbers, and worse things that do not leave tracks. Yet as you pass the churchyard wall, the first whisper reaches you. It comes from 2 women near a doorway, their heads closed beneath linen veils, their hands red from washing. One says, "They covered it at once." The other crosses herself and mutters that shining things are not to be trusted after dark. You do not turn your head too quickly. In a place like this, curiosity must walk as quietly as a cat. The doorway belongs to a narrow house with a painted lintel and a small horn lantern beside the step. Inside, through a crack in the shutter, you glimpse rushes on a stone floor and a beeswax candle burning with a steady yellow bead of flame. A cloth hangs over something square on the far wall. It might be a shelf, or a panel, or an icon turned away, yet everyone near it refuses to look directly at it. Even the dog behind you stops scratching and stares, which is not comforting, since dogs usually reserve that expression for bones and ghosts. A man in a fur-lined cloak steps from the house. At his belt hangs a ring of iron keys, each one dark and heavy enough to settle a dispute in a manor court. He speaks to the women in a low voice, and the word mirror slips out like a cold draught from beneath the door. You know the object, though not as people in later ages know it. It is not a common household trifle. Here, a mirror may be polished bronze. tin-backed glass if one is wealthy, or a small steel disc kept wrapped in cloth. It is expensive, strange, and a little vain. A bright little pond a person can hold in the hand, and bright little ponds have always made people nervous. You move on before you're accused of staring, though everyone else is clearly doing the same with more practice. The lane slopes toward the market square, where the last traders pull canvas over their stalls. The smell of onions, wet wool, horse dung, and smoked fish gathers in the cold air. Near a shuttered booth, an old woman ties a red thread around a basket handle. You have heard of such small protections before: thread against envy, iron against ill-wishing, rowan against whatever one's neighbour has decided is lurking this week. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these charms comfort people because they work, or whether they work because they comfort people. At the corner of the square, the church door opens, and a little cloud of candle warmth breathes out. Parishioners emerge, smelling of damp cloaks and incense. A man touches the pilgrim badge on his cap, a cheap lead token from a shrine where a saint's bone, tooth, sandal strap, or possibly optimistic substitute rests in a reliquary. He looks toward the narrow house, then away. Beside him, a girl with a milk pail whispers that the old glass was uncovered when the candle failed. Her mother hushes her. The word glass is treated almost as carefully as mirror, as if saying it too plainly might polish the darkness. You follow the flow of bodies toward an alehouse marked by a bunch of dry twigs over the door. Before you enter, you glance back once. The covered square shape remains dim behind the shutter crack, a hidden shine beneath cloth. Nothing moves there. Nothing calls. Yet the town seems arranged around it now. Every roof beam, every muddy footprint, every ring of the bell quietly pointing toward that veiled place. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the trouble began with a death, a dream, a crack in the glass, or one foolish look taken at the wrong hour. For now, you only know that night has settled over the walls. Your hands are cold. The dog has decided you belong to it, and somewhere behind a linen covering, a mirror waits without reflecting anyone at all. You duck beneath the alehouse lintel, and warmth folds around you with the heavy patience of an old blanket. It is not clean warmth. Exactly. It is warmth made of damp wool, wood smoke, spilled ale, onion skins, tallow, old rushes, and the deep private history of boots that have crossed too many roads. Still, after the gate wind, it feels almost princely. A fire crawls low in the hearth, turning the soot-black rafters brown and red, while a row of beeswax candles flickers along a shelf where the keeper stores cups, knives, and a small locked box for coins. The floor is strewn with rushes, fresh enough on top to be polite, old enough underneath to keep several secrets. You settle on a bench near the wall, with the dog curling under it as though it has paid rent here for years. The alewife brings you a wooden bowl of pottage, thick with peas and barley, and a heel of coarse bread that could either feed you or repair a cartwheel, depending on the need. A trencher lies before a fat merchant in a blue hood, its bread softened with gravy from smoked fish. Beside him, a carter warms his hands around a cup of ale so small it seems less like a drink than a moral lesson. No one drinks water if there is reasonable ale to be had, because ale at least has the courtesy to be boiled, strained, and blessed by habit, even if it still tastes faintly of a wet barn roof. At first, the talk is ordinary: market tolls, a missing hen, a priest who insists on longer sermons now that winter gives people fewer excuses to faint outdoors. Then the word returns, soft and bright: mirror. It passes from mouth to mouth like a coal lifted with tongs. The merchant in the blue hood says polished glass is a Venetian miracle, worth more than 3 good sheep and twice as difficult to keep safe. The carter grunts that any object worth 3 sheep is already suspicious. A pilgrim near the fire touches the lead badge pinned to his cloak and murmurs that he once saw a mirror in a noble house, no larger than a saint's palm. The lady who owned it kept it wrapped in silk when the moon was dark. Some swear that mirrors do not merely show a face. They invite the face closer, they coax the eye inward, they make a person linger over skin, hair, teeth, age, pride, and every wrinkle the Lord Winter and badly salted fish have placed upon them. The merchant says this is nonsense, of course, and then immediately smooths his beard in the side of his cup, which weakens his argument a little. The alewife notices, snorts, and says, vanity needs no glass. Most men can find it perfectly well in a puddle. You lift the bowl to your lips, letting the steam soften your nose. The pottage is plain, salty, and comforting, with one heroic onion trying to carry the entire dish. Around you, the alehouse breathes. Rain ticks against the shutter. Somewhere in the yard, a pig protests existence. The evening bell has faded, but its memory still seems to hang in the room, keeping time with the crackle of the fire. The talk turns stranger. A thin man with a pilgrim's staff claims that a mirror may catch the soul if a person looks into it during sickness, sleepwalking, or grief. No one can quite agree whether he heard this from a hermit, a midwife, or a man who sold false relics near Canterbury, but he tells it with such calm conviction that even the merchant stops chewing. The carter says his grandmother would not let a mirror face a bed, because the sleeping soul might wander out through the eyes and become confused by its own likeness. The alewife says his grandmother also believed a frog under the threshold cured toothache, so perhaps the family standard for evidence is not towering. Still, no one laughs very loudly. That is the thing you notice. In this room, people mock fear, then make room for it on the bench beside them. They joke about charms while wearing them. They laugh at omens while counting crows. The merchant carries a little pouch of salt sewn inside his sleeve. The carter has an iron nail bent into the edge of his belt. The pilgrim's badge glints like dull moonlight whenever the fire flares. Ordinary life here is built from bread, mud, prayer, rent, smoke, and 100 small protections against whatever cannot be explained before supper. The covered mirror from the narrow house is mentioned again. The alewife lowers her voice and says it belonged to Mistress Aveline, a widow with more candles than friends and more silver than was healthy for a soul. The merchant frowns at that, because merchants prefer not to hear silver described as spiritually dangerous. The mirror, she says, was not polished bronze but true glass, backed in dark metal, a treasure brought by a cousin who traded along roads no sensible person travels in winter. It hung beside a chest of linen and lavender, under a little carving of St. Margaret. The dog under your bench lifts its head at the name, or perhaps at the smell of fish bones. Its torn ear pricks. You scratch it lightly with the side of your boot, and it sighs as if forgiving you for all humanity's failures. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about what happened first. One says Mistress Aveline dreamed of her dead husband standing behind her shoulder in the mirror. Another says her candle went out, though there was no draught. A third insists the glass showed her room as it would look after her own burial. Bed stripped, rushes changed, shutters closed. The alewife says people add details the way cooks add onions generously, and not always because the stew requires them. Yet the fear beneath the tale is real. You can feel it in the way the room grows quieter when the fire sinks. A mirror is not like a bowl, or a spoon, or a shoe. Those things belong to the hand. A mirror belongs partly to the eye and partly to somewhere else. It gives back what stands before it, but reversed, cooled, and made separate. In a world where saints' relics can heal, bells can frighten storms, and a spoken curse may sit in a house like damp in a wall. A shining surface feels less like a tool than a doorway politely pretending not to be one. The merchant says bad luck is the simplest answer. Glass breaks. Pride follows beauty. Costly things breed envy, and envy is a sharper knife than hunger. The pilgrim shakes his head and says souls are the matter. The carter mutters that anything which makes a man look at his own face too long deserves a cloth over it. You sit among them, warming your hands around the cup, listening as rain darkens the shutters and the dog dreams beneath the bench. Then the alehouse door opens, cold air spills across the rushes, a woman in a dark hood stands in the doorway, lantern trembling in her hand, and asks for someone steady enough to help carry a covered thing from Mistress Aveline's chamber before the night grows deeper. For a breath, no one moves. The alehouse holds itself still, as if the smoke has been nailed to the rafters. Then the alewife wipes her hands on her apron and points at the carter, the pilgrim, and, with a look that suggests you have somehow volunteered by being alive, you, the merchant, suddenly discovers a deep devotion to finishing his fish. You rise from the bench, your knees stiff from cold and travel, while the dog slips out from beneath you and follows with the solemn confidence of a clerk attending an important mistake. Outside, the lane has turned black and slick. Rain gathers in the ruts, reflecting little scraps of torchlight, so that for every step you take, a broken orange world trembles under your boot. The woman in the dark hood walks ahead with her lantern held low. Her name, the carter whispers, is Eleanor, niece to Mistress Aveline. Her aunt died just after the evening bell, not violently, not strangely enough for ballads, only with winter in her chest and old age in her bones. Yet death, even the quiet kind, changes a house. It makes every stool look newly lonely, every cup seem uncertain of its owner. You reach the narrow house by the painted lintel. The same horn lantern burns beside the door, and the same covered square waits beyond the shutter crack. Eleanor unlocks the oak door with an iron key and leads you inside. The room smells of lavender, damp rushes, candle grease, wool blankets, and the faint sour trace of sickness. A small hearth glows under a hood of soot-black stone. Above it hangs a bunch of dried rosemary, tied with blue thread. Some swear rosemary keeps memory from wandering after the dead, though no one can quite agree whether it comforts the departed, the living, or only the person who tied it there with shaking hands. Mistress Aveline lies in the next chamber behind a curtain. You do not look long. A linen cloth covers her face, and 2 beeswax candles burn near her feet, their flames steady and small. A wooden bowl of salt rests beneath the bed, placed there, Eleanor says, because salt draws corruption away and discourages unclean spirits from lingering. The pilgrim crosses himself. The carter mutters that salt is also useful for ham, which is true but not especially helpful. The mirror hangs on the wall near the chest, exactly where the alewife said. It is not large, but its presence fills the chamber. A white cloth has been thrown over it and pinned at the corners with bone needles. Beneath the fabric, the frame makes a hard rectangular outline, and the hidden surface seems somehow colder than the stone around it. You tell yourself this is only because everyone is staring at it. That is often how fear works. It borrows the eyes of a room and becomes important. Eleanor asks you to help take it down. Her voice is calm in the manner of a person trying not to spill. She says the mirror must be covered until after burial, and perhaps longer, because her aunt's soul has not yet learned the road beyond the house. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on the rule. Some cover mirrors so the dead will not see themselves and be startled into staying. Some do it so the living will not glimpse the dead standing behind them. Some say a mirror left bare in a death room may trap the last breath, holding it like mist on glass. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these customs come from priestly caution, old hearth magic, or the plain kindness of not wanting grief to look back too clearly. You step closer. The floor rushes whisper under your boots. On the chest below the mirror sit small tokens of Avelin's life, a brass thimble, a rosary worn smooth by fingers, a folded kerchief scented with lavender, and a pilgrim badge shaped like a shell. There is also a little bowl of dried beans, because, Eleanor explains, her aunt counted them during long evenings when sleep would not come. This detail, more than the candles, makes the chamber feel tender. A whole life can shrink into a bowl of beans and a thimble when night arrives. The carter lifts the lower edge of the frame while you take the side. The pilgrim holds the lantern. The cloth trembles as your fingers find the wood beneath it. It is gilded once, perhaps, though smoke and age have dulled it to the colour of tired honey. The mirror is heavier than it looks. Costly things often are. You ease it upward from its hook, and for one small instant the cloth slips near the corner. Only a thumb's width of glass shows. Nothing terrible happens. No ghost leans out. No soul sighs like wind in a chimney. You see only a blade of darkness, a candle smear, and the pale curve of your own knuckle made strange by the angle. Yet your breath shortens all the same. A reflection is not frightening because it screams. It is frightening because it almost agrees with the world. And almost is a dangerous word after sunset. Eleanor catches the cloth and pins it again. Her hand brushes yours. It is cold as river water. She tells you her aunt would not keep the mirror uncovered on Fridays, nor during storms, nor when someone in the house was ill. She believed shining surfaces thinned the wall between ordinary sight and hidden sight. The priest disliked such talk, naturally, though he accepted her beeswax candles every Candlemas with admirable flexibility. Medieval theology, you are learning, can be stern in sermons and practical in the parish storeroom. Together, you carry the covered mirror into the outer room. The dog waits by the hearth, nose pointed toward the curtain, unusually quiet. The mirror is wrapped in a wool blanket and tied with cord, then leaned face down against a bench. Eleanor thanks you with a piece of coarse bread and a strip of smoked fish. Payment humble enough to keep pride from sprouting, but welcome enough that you eat at once. Before you leave, you glance back at the death chamber. The candles burn lower. The salt bowl sits hidden in shadow. The covered face is still. The room does not feel haunted exactly. It feels full of care, fear, habit, and love, all folded together like linen in a chest. Perhaps that is why mirrors trouble the living most when someone dies. They shine too cleanly in a house where everything has become uncertain. You step back into the rain with the carter and pilgrim, the dog padding after you through the mud. Behind you, Eleanor closes the oak door, and the iron key turns with a sound like a final word spoken softly. Rain follows you through the sleeping town as though it has been asked to make sure you leave properly. It taps on shutterboards, slides down timber posts, gathers along the brim of the pilgrim's hat, and turns the lane into a strip of black clay. You keep your cloak pulled close, your fingers tucked inside the wool, while the dog pads beside you with the quiet dignity of a creature who has already accepted this journey as your shared bad decision. The carter parts from you near the market cross, muttering about his horse, his cart, and the general failure of roads to behave like floors. The pilgrim continues toward the small monastery beyond the northern wall, and you go with him, because the alehouse is full. The widow's house is full of sorrow, and the night has become too wet for pride. A bell sounds once from the abbey tower, not loud, but deep enough to pass through fog and bone. It seems to draw you onward. The monastery gate is smaller than the town gate and sterner in its habits. An old lay brother opens it after much knocking, holding a horn lantern near your face as if searching for a written guarantee that you're not trouble. No one can quite agree whether monks are more charitable after dark or merely too tired to argue with wet travellers, but he lets you in. You cross a yard of slick stones where rainwater glimmers between patches of straw. Somewhere a mule shifts in its stall. Somewhere else, unseen chickens make soft, offended sounds, as chickens often do when history occurs near them. The guest house is low, stone-walled, and warmer than the road. Rushes cover the floor. Wool blankets lie folded on wooden pallets. A long table holds a jug of small ale, coarse bread, a bowl of beans, and a dish of smoked fish so salty it seems determined to outlive everyone in the room. The lay brother gives you a cup and points to the hearth, where peat burns with a slow, earthy smell. The dog sits immediately beside the fire and looks as if it has founded the monastery. You warm your hands. Your boots steam. The pilgrim removes his badge and dries it carefully with the edge of his sleeve. On the far side of the chamber, a monk sits at a writing desk beneath a beeswax candle, his shoulders bent, his fingers stained black with ink. He is copying a sermon, or perhaps a list of rents, which in this world may feel equally sacred depending on who owes what. His quill scratches softly over parchment. Beside him rests a knife for trimming the quill, a pumice stone, a little pot of ink, and a bundle of goose feathers tied with thread. He looks up only when the lay brother mentions the widow's mirror. At once his hand stills. He's young for a monk, though his face has the tired calm of someone who has been told to rise before dawn for several years and has not yet forgiven the bell. His name is Brother Martin. He asks very quietly whether the glass was covered before or after the woman died. The pilgrim answers after. Brother Martin presses his lips together, not in anger, but in the careful way of a man choosing which worry is most respectable. You sit near him while the rain rubs against the shutters. The candle between you bends whenever a draught slips under the door. Brother Martin tells you that a mirror troubles many minds because it stands too close to illusion. It gives back a body without giving back the soul. It flatters, reverses, deceives, and invites the eye to feast upon itself. A person may begin by checking a hair or a stain, he says, and end by loving the image more than the living face God placed in the world. The pilgrim nods solemnly. The dog licks its paw, offering a more balanced theological position. Some swear that devils use mirrors to tempt the proud, especially those who keep polished glass beside fine combs, scented oils, and little boxes of rouge. Others say the danger is not devils at all, but the mind itself, which can become snared by surfaces. Even now, it is hard to tell whether Brother Martin fears the mirror as an object, a symbol, or a very expensive excuse for human foolishness. He does not speak wildly. That makes him more convincing. Fear spoken calmly settles deeper than fear shouted across a market. He tells you of old stories copied in monastery libraries, tales of vain ladies who see skulls behind their faces, knights who glimpse wounds before battle, sinners who look into polished metal and find not their likeness but their secret sins staring back. He admits, with a small sigh, that scribes sometimes improve such tales until they behave better in sermons. A dull moral is like thin pottage, he says. It benefits from seasoning. This may be the first time tonight you hear a monk confess that frightening people can be a craft. Yet he also knows practical things. Mirrors are rare, glass is fragile, polished metal clouds easily. A household that owns one may be rich enough to attract envy, and envy breeds rumour as surely as damp straw breeds fleas. If the owner sickens, the mirror is blamed. If a candle gutters, the mirror is blamed. If a maid breaks a bowl after seeing her own face in it, the mirror is blamed, though Brother Martin suspects the maid was simply startled by a mouse, which is a less impressive demon but often more active. You ask whether the church forbids mirrors. He shakes his head. Not simply. A polished surface may help a barber shave a tonsure, a physician examine a swelling, a noblewoman arrange her veil before Mass. The object is not always wicked, but staring too long, loving too much, seeking signs where only glass gives back candlelight. There lies the danger. The medieval world has a talent for turning useful things into moral tests. Bread may become gluttony, wine may become sin, sleep may become sloth, and a mirror may become a tiny courtroom where vanity stands accused before supper. The candle lowers while he speaks. Wax gathers like pale tears along its side. From the chapel beyond the yard comes the faint scent of incense and cold stone. Brother Martin reaches into his sleeve and draws out a small disc of polished metal wrapped in linen. He uses it, he says, only to check whether ink has stained his face before he enters choir. Then he unwraps it for half a breath. You see nothing but firelight, his dark eye, and your own blurred shape beside him. He covers it again. The room settles. Rain softens. Somewhere beyond the wall, the town keeps its covered mirror. The widow keeps her silence. And you sit in the monastery guest house with wet boots, warm hands, and the strange thought that perhaps people fear mirrors because mirrors ask too much of them to look, and then to decide what kind of looking is safe. The bell wakes you before dawn, though wakes is too generous a word for what happens. It enters your sleep like a cold hand under the blanket and gently removes you from any hope of comfort. The monastery is still dark, its stone walls breathing out the night's chill, and for a moment you do not know where you are. Then the smell of peat ash, damp wool, old rushes, and beeswax returns. Brother Martin's half-burned candle has gone out on the writing desk, leaving a little stump of wax beside the ink pot. Your boots stand near the hearth, stiff and steamed dry into a shape that suggests they are still angry about yesterday. The dog sleeps with its nose beneath its tail, claiming the warmest patch of floor as if granted by royal charter. When you rise, it opens one eye, considers your worthiness, and decides to accompany you anyway. Outside, the monks pass toward the chapel in dark hoods, their sandals whispering over the stones. Their voices soon gather in low chant, soft as wind inside a jar. No one can quite agree whether prayer sounds holier before sunrise, or whether everyone is simply too tired to sing loudly. But the effect is calming all the same. You eat, standing beside the guest house door, coarse bread, a cup of small ale, and a piece of smoked fish so salted it seems less preserved than mummified. The pilgrim from the alehouse joins you, fastening his cloak with numb fingers. His lead badge, now dry, catches a grey thread of dawn. It shows a tiny shell, pressed flat and crude, bought from a shrine where the faithful say a saint once healed a blind woman, a lame ox, and possibly a tax collector. Though that last miracle sounds the least likely. The lay brother opens the monastery gate. Frost has silvered the yard. The world beyond is pale and hushed, with fields lying under mist and hedgerows drawn black against the sky. You step onto the pilgrim road, and the mud, frozen at the top but soft beneath, cracks under your boots. Your breath hangs before you. The dog trots ahead, then circles back as if checking that you have not been defeated by the morning. The road is not empty. A woman with a basket walks toward the town, a blue charm bead sewn into her sleeve. A wool seller leads 2 pack animals with bells tied low on their harness, the sound dull and sleepy. 3 pilgrims move together under patched cloaks, their badges pinned proudly to hats and breastbands, a little ampulla for holy water, a stamped image of a saint, a bent token from a shrine so famous that even counterfeiters speak of it respectfully. Some swear pilgrim badges protect travellers from fever, thieves, and bad weather. Others say they mostly prove one has survived a long walk and paid the proper fee at the end. Even now, it is hard to tell whether holiness clings to the metal, the journey, or the tired hand that touches it whenever the road grows lonely. You walk beside the pilgrim, who tells you his name is Odo. He has a voice like worn leather and a habit of tapping his staff 3 times whenever you pass a crossroad. He says it confuses wandering spirits because they cannot decide which path the sound belongs to. This explanation seems generous to the spirits and optimistic about sticks, but you say nothing. Medieval roads are full of customs too old to defend themselves. People knock on wood, spit lightly over a shoulder, tuck herbs into seams, and mutter saints' names under their breath. It costs little, and the unseen world, if it exists, seems easily offended. At a roadside shrine, you stop. It is only a niche cut into a stone post, roofed with 2 cracked tiles and holding a weather-worn carving of the Virgin, with a face nearly rubbed away by rain and fingers. Someone has left a crust of bread, a twist of red thread, and 3 pins stuck into the wood below. Odo bows his head. A passing carter touches the shrine without slowing. The woman with the basket leaves a sprig of rosemary, perhaps for a sick child, perhaps for a safe market day, perhaps because rosemary is the sort of herb people trust when explanations become thin. You notice other protections as the road bends along the fields, an iron horseshoe nailed above a cottage door, rowan twigs tied over a stable, a strip of linen knotted around a hawthorn branch, fluttering stiffly in the frost. Near one gate, a shallow bowl of salt sits beneath a bench, much like the salt bowl under Mistress Aveline's bed. In another yard, a mother rubs a child's forehead with a little pouch of herbs and murmurs a charm against night terrors. She does it quickly, almost shyly, as if the priest might disapprove, but not enough to stop her. Fear and faith live side by side here, sharing the same hearth and occasionally the same spoon. The memory of the covered mirror follows you. It is strange how a hidden thing can travel in the mind more easily than an uncovered one. You imagine it wrapped in wool inside the widow's house, face down against the bench, holding nothing but darkness. Yet the road teaches you that mirrors are only one bright piece of a larger fear. People guard doors, beds, cradles, cattle, thresholds, wells, and even dreams. They bless candles at Candlemas, hang herbs by windows, keep saints' relics close, and carry little badges as proof that holy places have touched ordinary lives. Odo shows you a small bone wrapped in cloth and tied with thread inside his pouch. He says it comes from a blessed hermit's finger. The dog sniffs it with interest, which does not improve its dignity. No one can quite agree whether such relics are always what sellers claim, and Odo himself admits that holy bones seem remarkably plentiful for men who only had the usual number. Still, he carries it gently. It has crossed rain, hunger, and bad inns with him. Sometimes a doubtful relic may still be a true comfort. The sun rises slowly, a pale coin behind mist. Frost loosens into dampness. Rooks lift from the fields with rough cries. Your cloak grows heavy again at the hem, and the smell of wet wool returns like an old companion. Ahead, beyond bare trees, the town's roofs appear, smoke beginning to rise from them in blue threads. The morning market will soon stir, but for now you remain on the road, walking among charms, prayers, badges, bells, and breath, feeling how carefully people move through a world they cannot fully see. By the time you reach the market square, the town has begun to wake in layers. First come the bells, thin and silver in the mist. Then come the shutters, creaking open like old knees. Then the voices rise low, bargaining, sleepy scolding, the slap of buckets, the cough of a mule, the clatter of wooden wheels over stones. Smoke curls from roof holes, carrying the smell of damp hearths and yesterday's ashes. Your boots find the same mud that welcomed you last night, though now it has been stirred by carts, hooves, hens, and people with stronger opinions than balance. Odo walks beside you, tapping his staff whenever the crowd presses close. The dog follows between your heels and the pilgrim's cloak, occasionally vanishing beneath the stall and emerging with the expression of one who has inspected commerce and found it edible. A market toll clerk sits beneath the cross with a wax tablet, scratching marks for each seller who enters. He has ink on his thumb, a wool cap pulled down over his ears, and the dry misery of a man paid to count cabbages in cold weather. Medieval glory, you begin to understand, often involves a great deal of damp administration. The stalls bloom slowly under canvas onions in baskets, coarse bread stacked beneath cloth, smoked fish hanging by the tail, bundles of rushes for floors, old shoes, new knives, wooden bowls, wool thread dyed with madder and woad. A woman ladles hot pottage from an iron pot into wooden cups, and steam rises around her face like a saint in a kitchen miracle. Nearby, a boy fans a charcoal brazier beneath a pan of chestnuts. The scent is sweet, warm, and brief, gone almost before you can name it. Then you see the bright things. They lie on a merchant's table near the church wall, guarded more carefully than bread and stared at more cautiously than knives. Glass beads glow in little rows, green as riverweed, blue as cold dawn, amber like trapped candlelight. Beside them rest polished belt fittings, brass buckles, pewter brooches, and small discs of metal rubbed until they hold a trembling shine. At the centre, wrapped in dark wool, are two mirrors, one of polished steel, round and no wider than a palm, and another of smoky glass set in a wooden frame carved with vines. People pass, slow, look, pretend not to look, and return. The merchant is a narrow man with a trimmed beard and a hood lined in faded fur. He speaks softly, which is clever, because soft speech makes costly objects seem holier. He tells a young wife that the glass came through ports, pack roads, warehouses, and hands that knew silver by weight and lies by smell. He tells an apprentice that a polished steel mirror can last years if kept dry, wiped with fine cloth and not dropped by fools. He tells an old farmer nothing at all, because the farmer's face already says he considers the whole table a trap set by pride. Some swear blue beads guard against the evil eye. Others say amber warms a weak chest if worn near the skin, though Brother Martin would probably sigh into his inkpot at that. No one can quite agree whether a polished disc invites danger, or merely reflects the danger already standing nearby with muddy boots. Still, even the doubters lean close. It is hard not to. Brightness is rare here. Most of the life is wood, wool, stone, smoke, earth, and the muted brown of things used until they give up. A shining object feels almost like stolen weather. A girl with a linen veil asks to see the steel mirror. Her mother grips her sleeve. The merchant unwraps it and holds it toward the light. The disc flashes, not clearly, but enough. It gives back a pale oval, a dark hood, the wobbling shapes of stalls behind. The girl gasps, then laughs, then looks ashamed of laughing. Her mother crosses herself with 2 fingers and says a maiden should not admire her own face before noon, especially on a market day. The merchant replies that the mirror is just as useful after noon, and probably more expensive by then. Odo mutters that pride travels faster than pilgrims. Yet he too peers at the disc, and for one tiny moment his lined face appears in the metal, bent and ghost-like. He flinches. Then he pretends he's only sneezed. The dog sneezes immediately afterward, which feels rude but fair. You stand at the edge of the stall, warming your hands around a cup of hot ale bought from the pottage woman. The drink is thin and sour, but the heat travels into your fingers, and that is enough. Around you, buyers argue with themselves. A barber considers the steel disc for shaving tonsures and trimming beards. A noble servant examines the glass mirror for his lady, though he keeps it angled away from his own eyes. A young man in patched sleeves asks whether a mirror can show a sweetheart's true heart if breathed upon at midnight. The merchant says many things are possible for an extra penny. This, you feel, is not theology, but business. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people fear the mirrors because they believe old tales, or because owning such a thing changes how others look at them. A mirror says you have coin. It says you care about your face. It says you keep a little private brightness in a house where neighbours notice everything from smoke colour to stew smell. In a town of thin walls and loud hens, privacy itself can look suspicious. An older woman lifts one of the glass beads and holds it against her wrist. She says her sister once bought a bright bead after harvest and lost 2 geese, a husband's tooth, and half a roof that winter. The merchant suggests Winter may have had a hand in the roof. She answers that Winter did not take the geese in that order. Those nearby nod because sequence matters greatly in superstition. 1 misfortune is weather. 2 may be age. 3 is a story looking for an object to blame. At last the noble servant buys the smoky glass mirror. The merchant wraps it in linen, then wool, then ties it with cord as carefully as Eleanor bound Mistress Avelin's. The servant tucks it beneath his cloak without looking pleased. Perhaps he imagines his lady delighted by it. Perhaps he imagines explaining the price to the household steward. Both visions are dangerous. You move away as the market thickens. Behind you, the bright table remains surrounded by hunger of many kinds. Hunger for beauty, luck, status, protection, proof. The bells fade into the market noise, and the smell of wet wool rises again as shoulders brush past you. Somewhere beneath the crowd, the dog barks once, triumphant, and appears with the stolen crust. You follow Odo toward the far side of the square, carrying the uneasy glitter of those small mirrors in your mind like candlelight that refuses to go out. The rain returns while the market is still pretending it will become a cheerful day. It begins as a mist, fine enough to ignore, then thickens into a grey curtain that beads on hoods, darkens wool, and turns the rushes underfoot into a tired green mash. Sellers pull cloth over baskets. The pottage woman moves her pot closer to the wall. The toll clerk shields his wax tablet beneath his cloak and looks wounded by weather. Odo leads you from the square toward the manor yard, where the reeve is expected to sit in judgment beneath the lord's timber hall. The dog trots close at your heel, crust clenched in its teeth like a legal document. You pass cottages with smoke leaking from their roofs, a cooper's shed smelling of oak shavings, and a woman beating mud from a wool blanket with more force than the blanket seems to deserve. Above one door hangs dried vervain tied with white thread. Some swear it keeps quarrels from entering a house, though no one can quite agree whether it works better before or after the quarrel has already learned the way in. The manor court gathers in a covered yard beside the hall, where rain drips from the eaves in steady strings. Villagers stand in damp clusters, boots sinking into straw laid over mud. A clerk sits at a trestle table with a horn inkwell, a roll of parchment, and the expression of a man who believes every neighbour's dispute could have been avoided by better handwriting. The reeve hears complaints about boundary stones, unpaid hens, a borrowed ploughshare, and one emotional argument over whether a pig has maliciously trespassed or merely followed its nature. Medieval law, you discover, spends a surprising amount of time considering pigs. You wait beneath the eaves with Odo while the rain drums above. A man near you rubs his wrist with a leather charm pouch stuffed with sage, salt, and a scrap of blessed candle from Candlemas. He claims it eases joint pain when the sky turns wet. Another villager says a hot brick wrapped in cloth works better. The first replies that bricks lack holiness. The second says holiness is admirable, but a brick stays warm. Then the cracked mirror is brought forward. It is wrapped in an old linen sheet, carried by 2 women as carefully as a sick child. The crowd shifts. Even the clerk lifts his quill. When the sheet is opened, you see not fine glass like the noble servant bought, but a polished metal disc set in a plain wooden frame, its surface clouded with age and split by a crooked crack. The crack runs from upper edge to centre, then turns sharply, like a path avoiding a grave. Rainlight trembles in it. The disc reflects nothing clearly, only broken shapes of sleeve, a chin, a grey strip of sky. The woman who owns it is named Maud. Her cap is soaked flat against her hair, and her hands twist together at her waist. She tells the reeve that since the mirror cracked, her cow has given thin milk. Her eldest son has taken fever. Her husband has quarrelled with his brother over a ditch, and the barley in the lower strip has failed. Their neighbour says the crack appeared after Maud's daughter looked into it by candlelight on the eve of St. Agnes, hoping to dream of the man she would marry. This detail causes several young women in the crowd to become suddenly interested in the mud. You have heard of the custom, a girl fasting or performing some small ritual before St. Agnes night, hoping her future husband will appear in dream or reflection. Some swear it is harmless courtship magic. Priests tend to call it foolishness, unless the family involved has donated enough wax to soften vocabulary. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such customs are belief, play, longing, or all 3 braided together. The reeve scratches his beard. He asks whether the cow may have eaten spoiled hay. Maud says the hay was sound. He asks whether the son's fever came after standing in rain. Maud says boys stand in rain every year and do not always make mirrors crack. He asks whether brothers need a mirror to quarrel over ditches. This earns a low laugh, because everyone knows brothers can quarrel over ditches in total darkness. Yet the laughter fades. The failed barley is real. The fever is real. Thin milk means hunger. A cracked mirror may not cause these things, but it gives fear a shape small enough to carry into court. In a world where harvests hang on weather, worms, saints, tools, and one aging cow, people long for a reason that can be wrapped in linen and pointed at. Brother Martin appears at the edge of the yard, called from the monastery by someone with quicker feet than confidence. His hood is wet, ink still stains one finger, and he looks at the mirror with the patience of a man asked to settle whether metal can commit mischief. He says the crack itself holds no power unless people give it power through dread, anger, and vanity. He advises prayer, mending of quarrels, fresh hay for the cow, and willow bark for the fever. Boiled gently if the boy can keep it down. This is sensible, holy, and medically modest, which disappoints anyone hoping for a demon. Maud asks whether the mirror should be broken fully and buried at a crossroads. Some swear that cracked, shining things must be buried where 4 roads meet, so wandering harm loses its way. Others insist they should be dropped into running water, where the river carries ill luck downstream to trouble fish, millers, or another parish. Brother Martin frowns at both options. The reeve suggests selling the frame for firewood and giving the metal to the smith. Perhaps the most practical exorcism available. The decision is written down, no blame, no fine, no charge of witchcraft, only instruction that the quarrel over the ditch be settled by measuring rods after Mass, and that the cracked mirror be removed from Maud's house. The crowd seems almost dissatisfied by the fairness of it. People like justice, but they also enjoy a conclusion with more thunder. As you leave the yard, rain softens to mist again. Odo touches his pilgrim badge. The dog drops its crust at your feet, then picks it up again, unwilling to trust even you with property. Behind you, Maud's mirror is wrapped once more, its crack hidden in linen, its power reduced but not entirely gone. You understand then that fear does not need proof to live. It needs weather, hunger, sickness, and a shining thing broken at just the wrong time. The manor yard falls behind you, but the cracked mirror seems to keep walking beside your thoughts, hidden under linen, blamed for milk, fever, barley, and brothers who would almost certainly have quarrelled without assistance. Odo says little as you leave the hall. Brother Martin returns toward the monastery with his hood low and his ink-stained hand tucked inside his sleeve. The dog noses at puddles, finds none worthy, and shakes itself directly beside your leg. Because loyalty has limits and apparently no manners. A woman from the court catches up near the cooper's shed. She's broad-shouldered, grey-eyed, and wrapped in a brown cloak pinned with a clasp. Her name is Isabel, though people call her Belle of the Lane, partly because she lives near the bell founder's old house, and partly because she arrives whenever trouble rings loud enough. She tells Maud to bring her fevered son before sunset if the boy can walk, and to send for her if he cannot. Then she turns to you and Odo, as if travellers also require inspection, and says you both look wet enough to sprout mushrooms. You follow her down a side lane where rainwater runs along the stones in narrow silver threads. Her cottage stands behind a low wattle fence, with bundles of herbs hanging beneath the eaves: sage, rosemary, rue, yarrow, lavender, mint, and dried nettles tied in careful knots. Smoke rises from the roof hole. A cat sits on the threshold, watching the dog with the grave authority of a bishop. The dog lowers its head, pretending deep respect, though no one can quite agree whether dogs understand cats or merely recognise advanced wickedness. Inside, the cottage is dim, warm, and crowded with useful things. Rushes cover the packed earth floor. An iron pot swings over the hearth, breathing steam scented with onions and something bitter. A shelf holds clay jars, linen strips, wooden spoons, beeswax, a small mortar, a bundle of feathers, and a shallow bowl filled with leeches in dark water. They cling to the side of the bowl like tiny damp thoughts. You try not to look too interested. Leeches, you suspect, are one of those medieval remedies best admired from across the room. Belle sets a stool near the fire and motions for you to sit. Odo remains standing, his pilgrim badge glinting faintly. The dog curls beneath the table, while the cat chooses a high chest and becomes judgment-made fur. Belle warms ale with honey and a pinch of ground herb, then hands you a cup. It tastes smoky, sweet, and medicinal in a way that suggests health is not always meant to be enjoyable. Soon Maud arrives with her son, wrapped in a wool blanket. The boy's cheeks are flushed, his eyes heavy, and his breath rasps softly. Belle does not mention the mirror at first. She lays a hand on his forehead, checks his tongue, listens to his chest, and asks what he has eaten. She tells Maud to steep willow bark, keep him warm, change the straw beneath him, and open the shutter briefly each morning so foul air does not sit in the room like an unwanted guest. This is the ordinary part of healing fire, herbs, clean linen if one can afford it, patience if one cannot. Only after that does Maud whisper that the boy saw himself in the cracked mirror the night before the fever. Belle nods, not as if she believes everything, and not as if she believes nothing. That is her skill. Some swear a healer must know which fears to cure and which to simply carry gently until they tire. She takes a sprig of rosemary, dips it in warmed ale, and touches it lightly to the boy's brow, while murmuring a prayer to St. Blais, patron of throats, and another phrase older than any church book Odo has seen. Brother Martin might lift an eyebrow. The mother relaxes. The boy closes his eyes. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the remedy works through herb, heat, holiness, habit, or the simple mercy of someone competent taking charge. Belle ties a red thread around the blanket's corner, not tight, not theatrical. She says it reminds fear to stay outside the bed. She places a little salt in a linen scrap and tells Maud to tuck it near the door. then adds that stale straw must be carried out tomorrow and burned, because no charm can do the work of clean bedding. This, you decide. Is wisdom sturdy enough to lean on? Maud asks whether the cracked mirror has poisoned the house. Belle snorts softly. Poison sits in bad meat, dirty water, and jealous talk, she says. A mirror mostly shows people what they're already frightened of seeing. But she does not mock Maud. She has seen strong men tremble at shadows in polished cups. Brides refuse to look into still water before Mass, and old women cover brass pans when lightning walks the sky. Fear is a fever of its own, and it spreads faster when laughed at. Belle takes a polished spoon from the shelf and holds it toward the hearth. In its curved back, the fire bends into a little golden eye, and your own face appears stretched and strange. The boy opens his eyes, sees the warped reflection, and gives a weak laugh. Belle says there now, if the spoon has not stolen your soul, perhaps the mirror was only rude. The joke is dry as old bread, but the room softens around it. Even Maud smiles with one side of her mouth. Then Belle covers the spoon with her palm and explains that shining things need rules because people need rules. Keep them clean. Do not stare when ill. Do not let grief sit alone with them. Do not ask them questions meant for priests, mothers, or honest neighbours. A mirror is a tool when used lightly, she says, and a torment when used like a doorway. You drink the last of the honeyed ale. Outside, the rain thins to a fine silver dust. The cottage smells of rosemary, smoke, wet wool, and warmed fear slowly becoming ordinary worry again. Maud gathers her son and thanks Belle with a loaf, 2 eggs, and a promise of mending. Payment here is rarely coin. It is bread, thread, labour, remembrance, and the hope that the help given today will find its way back before winter bites too hard. When you step outside, evening has not yet fallen, but the day leans toward it. The dog darts ahead, the cat watches from the threshold, and Belle calls after you to avoid forest pools at twilight, because water has a habit of showing faces that are not ready to be named. Odo crosses himself. You pull your cloak close and follow the lane toward the road, carrying the smell of herbs with you, and the quieter thought that sometimes people are healed not by ending fear, but by teaching it to sit nearer the fire. Belle's warning follows you out of the lane as lightly as the smell of rosemary clinging to your cloak. Avoid forest pools at twilight, she has said, because water has a habit of showing faces that are not ready to be named. Odo repeats this once, not loudly, and taps his staff 3 times at the place where the town road splits from the pilgrim way. The dog pauses, looks at both paths, and chooses the one with more mud, which is perhaps not wisdom but certainly confidence. You leave the last cottages behind. Their smoke thins into the damp air, and soon the town becomes only a low blur of roofs and bells behind you. Ahead, the forest waits in winter stillness. Bare branches lace over the road like black fingers. Brown leaves lie pressed into the ruts, and the ground smells of wet bark, moss, old rain, and cold earth. Your boots sink, lift, sink again. The hem of your cloak grows heavy, and the familiar scent of wet wool rises around you like a tired companion who has run out of conversation. The road narrows beneath ash and oak. Here and there, someone has tied bits of cloth to low branches, linen scraps, faded red thread, a strip of blue wool, each one stiff from weather. Some swear such rags are offerings for safe passage, left for saints, spirits, or whichever local power has been blamed most often for lost travellers. No one can quite agree whether the practice is holy, heathen, or simply useful for marking the way when mist comes down. Odo touches none of them. He says a traveller should not untie another person's fear. You walk slowly. The forest does not threaten in any sudden way. It merely gathers sound and gives little back. A crow calls once, far off. Water drips from branches though the rain has stopped. Somewhere in the brush, a small animal moves with the seriousness of a tax collector. The dog trots ahead, then returns, shaking leaves from its muzzle. Odo tells you that forest folk sometimes carry hazel twigs to keep from being led astray by false lights. He has no hazel twig himself, only a staff. His doubtful little bone relic, and the sort of expression that suggests he hopes heaven accepts substitutions. As evening thickens, the road dips. Frost lingers in hollows where the sun never quite arrives. You pass a wayside cross leaning under moss, its carved Christ worn nearly smooth by weather and fingers. At its base sits a clay cup with 3 pins inside and a crust of bread gone soft from damp. Someone has scratched a small eye into the post, perhaps as protection, perhaps as warning, even now. It is hard to tell whether symbols guard people from the unseen or remind them how much they fear being watched. Then the trees open. A pool lies beside the road, still and dark, fed by a narrow stream hidden under roots. It is not large. A person could throw a stone across it easily, yet the quiet of it stops you more than sighs ever could. Black water holds the dim sky, the leaning branches, the pale beginning of evening star. Its surface is smooth enough to seem deliberate. Unlike a river, it does not hurry away with what it sees. It keeps things. Odo stops at once. The dog approaches the edge, sniffs, and drinks. This should make the place less ominous, but dogs have never been reliable judges of spiritual danger. They also eat things found behind alehouses. You stand beside the pool and look down. Your face appears there, stretched by darkness, broken slightly by the dog's ripples. For a moment, you understand the fear better than you did in the market. A metal mirror is made by human hands. A glass mirror can be wrapped, sold, blamed, locked in a chest. But water belongs to the world before doors. It reflects without asking permission. Odo tells you not to stare too long. Some swear that still water at twilight shows not the face you have, but the face others speak of when you are absent. Others say it shows the dead, because the dead are lighter than breath and can stand behind reflections without troubling the ground. A widow may avoid wells after burial. A bride may refuse to look into a basin before her wedding. A fevered child may have the wash water thrown eastward before sunrise. So illness does not find its way back by its own reflection. You kneel, though not too close. The mud is cold beneath one hand. In the pool, your hooded shape wavers beside Odo's thin outline and the bent black trees. Then a leaf falls. The surface breaks. Your face scatters into rings and reforms badly, with one eye larger, one cheek darker, your mouth loosened into a stranger's expression. Nothing supernatural happens, and yet you draw back. Odo gives a small nod, as if this proves something neither of you wishes to name. You sit on a fallen log nearby and share bread from your pouch. It is hard, stale, and honest. Odo contributes a strip of dried fish, which the dog considers a personal revelation. You eat slowly while twilight gathers. The forest smells of damp leaves and distant smoke. Somewhere behind you, perhaps from the town, perhaps from the monastery, a bell sounds faintly through the trees. It is too far away to count the hour, but near enough to remind you that people are still keeping time beyond the branches. Odo speaks of a village where women covered wash basins after sunset because a girl once saw a second face beneath her own. He admits the tale changes depending on who tells it. Sometimes the face is a drowned sister, sometimes a jealous neighbour, sometimes simply the moon. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but they agree on one thing: the girl never looked into still water again. You think of Mistress Avelin's veiled glass, Brother Martin's polished disc, Maud's cracked mirror, Belle's spoon bending the fire into a golden eye. So many surfaces, so many attempts to meet the self and return safely. Perhaps medieval people do not fear mirrors only because they are ignorant or superstitious. Perhaps they fear them because life here gives so little privacy, and yet reflection offers too much of it at once. Alone with your own face, you may find pride, grief, guilt, age, longing, or merely a tired traveller with muddy boots and no better plan. The dog finishes the fish and barks at its own reflection. The reflection barks silently back. After a long pause, the dog retreats behind your legs, which feels both sensible and deeply unheroic. You rise before darkness fully settles. Odo taps his staff 3 times, and together you return to the road. Behind you, the pool smooths itself again, patiently gathering branches, sky, and the last pale trace of your passing. It keeps no proof except silence, which in this world is often enough to become a story. The road climbs after the forest pool, and the trees loosen their grip little by little. Behind you, the water keeps its dark counsel. Ahead, a hill rises from the mist, crowned by a squat stone keep and a ring of timber palisade where torchlight burns in trembling knots. The sky has gone the deep blue of old bruised cloth, and the first stars appear between torn clouds. Your legs ache from mud, frost, and the long habit of not being born wealthy enough to ride everywhere. Odo leans on his staff, breathing steadily, while the dog trots ahead with sudden importance, as if it has arranged this castle welcome personally. At the foot of the hill, you pass fields silvered by evening damp. A shepherd folds hurdles around sheep, muttering charms against foxes and thieves. Some swear a scrap of iron hung from the hurdle gate keeps night-wandering spirits from souring the flock, though no one can quite agree whether spirits trouble sheep more than bad weather, bad fences, or shepherds who enjoy ale too early. The smell of animals, wet earth, and wood smoke rises together. Somewhere in a barn, a cow shifts in straw. Somewhere above, a watchman calls the hour from the wall, his voice stretched thin by wind. The keep grows larger as you climb. Its stones are old, patched, and damp, dark at the base where rain has lived for years. The gatehouse is not grand, but it knows its own importance. 2 guards stand beneath the arch in padded jacks and wool caps, their spears angled across the path. One carries a lantern, the other has the red nose of a man who has discovered that guarding a gate in winter is mostly an argument with circulation. Odo shows his pilgrim badge. You show empty hands, tired eyes, and the general appearance of someone too exhausted to be a convincing spy. After questions, grunts, and one suspicious look at the dog, they let you in. The yard inside is busy even at night. Servants cross through torchlight with buckets, firewood, baskets of turnips, and folded cloths. A stable boy leads a steaming horse toward the stalls. Chickens sleep badly near a cart shed, occasionally complaining in their dreams. The smell of hay, dung, hot iron, and roasting meat drifts from the kitchens. You see a laundress wringing out linen by lantern light, her sleeves rolled to the elbow despite the cold. Medieval comfort, it seems. Depends on many people being uncomfortable in an organised fashion. You and Odo are not led straight into the Lord's private warmth. Of course, travellers do not simply stroll into noble halls unless they are envoys, minstrels, confessors, or trouble with better shoes. But the steward, a narrow man with a belt full of keys and the face of a locked cupboard, allows you a place near the lower end of the hall. Perhaps it is charity. Perhaps Odo's badge persuades him. Perhaps the dog looks pathetic with professional skill. The hall is long, high-roofed, and alive with fire. Flames leap in the central hearth, smoke climbing toward rafters black as winter branches. Rushes cover the floor, mixed with sweet herbs near the high table lavender, meadow sweet, and crushed rosemary. scattered to tame the smell of boots, dogs, and human ambition. Beeswax candles burn near the Lord's chair, while cheaper tallow dips smoke along the side tables. Shields hang on the walls, spears rest in racks. A woven hanging shows a hunt, though the embroidered deer appears deeply unconvinced by its own legs. You sit on a bench below the salt, close enough to warmth to be grateful and far enough from rank to remain realistic. Servants bring trenchers of stale bread, then ladle pottage, roasted onions, and gravy over them. There is smoked fish, coarse bread, a bowl of peas, and thin ale passed in wooden cups. At the high table, the Lord eats from finer vessels, and his lady's sleeves are lined with fur. A clerk reads a letter by candlelight. A chaplain murmurs grace. The steward watches everyone as if counting both spoons and sins. On the wall behind the lady hangs a small mirror in a carved frame. You notice it because no one else seems to look at it directly. It is partly hidden by a hanging cloth, not fully covered, but shaded, as though permitted to exist only if it behaves. The glass catches firelight in a dull amber flash, not bright enough to show a face clearly, but bright enough to remind the room that faces can be shown. During the meal, a young page bumps the bench and spills ale across a trencher. He freezes as if expecting thunder. The steward sighs, not angrily, but with the sorrow of a man whose life is made of small failures arranged in rows. The page wipes the board with the linen cloth, then touches 2 fingers to the little saint's medal sewn inside his sleeve. Some swear Saint Zita guards servants from household misfortune, though those who tell the tale never fully agree whether she helps more with broken dishes, angry masters, or bread that refuses to rise. The Lord laughs at something a visiting knight says, and the hall loosens. Dogs move beneath the tables, hunting bones with quiet diplomacy. Your own torn-eared companion watches them with wounded dignity, then joins at once. Odo eats slowly, saving half his bread in his pouch, because pilgrims learn that full stomachs are temporary and roads are not. You warm your hands near your cup and feel the long day settle into your bones, the covered mirror, the ink-stained monk, the cracked disc in court. Bell's herbs, they pool black under trees. After the meal, as candles shorten and servants begin clearing boards, you see 2 maids approach the wall behind the lady's chair. One lifts the cloth, the other turns the little mirror inward, face toward the stone, then lets the cloth fall over it completely. They do it without ceremony, as casually as banking a fire, yet the gesture changes the hall. The bright object is gone. The room becomes only wood, flame, wool, breath, and shadow. You ask a grey-haired servant nearby why they turn it so. She glances toward the steward before answering. At night, she says, mirrors should not watch sleepers. A hall holds too many dreams after supper, noble worries, servant fears, envy, longing, old guilt, and indigestion pretending to be prophecy. Better to let the glass face stone until dawn. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she says this from belief, habit, or the practical wisdom that no one wants a half-waking lord to glimpse a moving reflection and blame the nearest servant. Later, pallets are laid near the lower wall for travellers, lesser guests, and household folk not lucky enough to have chambers. Wool blankets scratch your neck. The rushes smell of herbs, smoke, and yesterday. The dog circles 3 times and collapses against your side. Odo whispers a prayer into his cloak. Above, the covered mirror waits against the stone, blind for the night, while the hall sinks into the soft noise of sleeping bodies, settling embers, and wind pressing gently at the shutters. You wake beneath the lower wall with a wool blanket twisted around one shoulder, and the dog pressed against your ribs like a warm, untidy loaf. Dawn has not fully entered the hall. but the fire has fallen into red eyes beneath grey ash, and the rafters above still hold the night's smoke. Around you, sleepers stir in layers, servants rising first, travellers after them, noble guests last, because rank has many privileges and one of them is pretending mornings arrive later. A maid moves quietly along the wall, gathering cups. Another shakes rushes into a basket where they will be carried out and replaced with fresher herbs near the high table. The old rushes smell of spilled ale, damp boots, dog hair, and all the conversations they have been forced to overhear. From the kitchens comes the scrape of a pot and the sharper scent of onions beginning their day's long service, somewhere outside. A cock crows with the confidence of a creature that has never been asked to pay rent. Odo wakes beside you, pats his pouch for his pilgrim badge and doubtful relic, and sighs with relief when both remain. The dog yawns, showing an impressive arrangement of teeth, then rests its head again, as if spiritual journeys are best delayed. You sit up slowly. Your back aches from the pallet. But the hall is warmer than the road, and gratitude, like pottage, need not be finely seasoned to sustain a person. At the high end, the cloth is lifted from the mirror that had been turned toward stone. The maid turns it outward again, but only after crossing herself. Morning, it seems, makes reflection respectable. Night gives it too much imagination. Soon the lady of the keep enters with 2 attendants. She's not young, but she carries herself with the careful stillness of someone accustomed to being watched. Her gown is dark green wool, trimmed at the cuffs with worn fur. A linen veil frames her face, and a narrow belt hangs at her waist with keys, a small knife, and a pomander pierced with holes to hold sweet herbs. The pomander swings gently as she walks, releasing a faint scent of cloves and rosemary into the smoky air. Some swear such scents guard against foul humours and sickness. No one can quite agree whether they purify the air, please the nose, or simply remind everyone that wealth can afford better smells. The gilded mirror is brought from the wall to a table near the window. You see it more clearly now. It is small, oval, set in a carved frame touched with gold leaf, though the gilding is thin at the edges where fingers have held it over many mornings. The glass inside is dimmer than later ages would expect. It does not show a face sharply, it gathers one slowly, like water deciding whether to settle. Still, compared with polished spoons, river pools, and Maud's cracked disc, it is wondrous. The lady sits. One attendant holds the mirror while another adjusts her veil. A comb of carved bone passes gently through grey-brown hair. A little pot of ointment sits open on the table, beside a strip of linen, a silver pin, and a rosary of dark beads. This is not idle luxury alone. In a noble household, appearance is part of order. A veil sits properly. A wimple frames the face. A sleeve falls correctly. Rank must be dressed every morning before it can give instructions. Yet the room watches the mirror more carefully than the comb. You stand near the lower tables with a cup of small ale warming your hands. The steward notices you noticing and gives you a look sharp enough to slice cheese. But he says nothing. Odo, beside you, lowers his voice and murmurs that fine mirrors are like fine horses, useful, costly, and likely to make fools of those who boast too much about owning them. The lady gazes into the glass only briefly each time. She looks, adjusts, looks away. The rhythm feels deliberate, almost devotional. She does not stare. Perhaps she has been taught not to. Brother Martin's warning returns to you. A mirror can become a tiny courtroom where vanity stands accused. For a woman of rank, the charge is more complicated. She's expected to appear graceful, modest, prosperous, orderly, fertile if young, wise if older, obedient to God, useful to family, and impressive to visitors who will judge the household by the turn of her sleeve. It is a great burden to place upon one dim oval of glass. Some swear a noble woman may read omens in her own reflection on feast days, a shadow behind the shoulder, a pale cast to the lips, a candle burning double in the glass. Others say such talk grows from servants watching their betters too closely and inventing stories to fill the pauses. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the lady's attendants fear the mirror itself, or fear being blamed if the lady sees something there she dislikes. A younger maid brings a basin of warmed water. Steam curls upward. The lady dips her fingers, then touches her brow, cheeks, and chin. The water catches her face in pieces, and for an instant there are two reflections before her, the one in glass and the one trembling in the basin. She looks away first from the water. Perhaps Belle of the Lane would approve. Water at dawn is safer than water at twilight, but no one wise trusts a surface too completely. The chaplain enters then, carrying a book and smelling faintly of cold chapel stone. He blesses the household bread laid on a sideboard and speaks gently with the lady. His eyes flick once toward the mirror. He does not condemn it. Noble gifts have a way of becoming morally acceptable when they hang in useful houses. Yet he reminds her that beauty is lent, not owned, and that the soul must be polished with more care than glass. It is the sort of sentence that sounds comforting until one realizes it has been sharpened at both ends. The lady smiles faintly. Perhaps she's heard it before. Perhaps every fine mirror arrives with a sermon hidden in its wrapping. When she rises, the mirror is covered again, not fully hidden, only protected. The attendant wraps it in a soft cloth and places it in a small chest with iron fittings. The key goes to the lady's belt. This, too, says something. A mirror is treasure, tool, temptation, and private companion. It is not left where any hand may take it or any eye may ask it questions. Later, as the household moves into the business of the day, you pass the chest and notice how ordinary it looks: oak, iron, scratches, dust in the corners. Inside lies the gilded mirror, holding nothing while it waits. That may be what unsettles you most. Not that it reflects, but that when covered and locked away, it seems to keep the memory of reflection, as if every face ever offered to it has left a breath upon the glass. By mid-morning, you and Odo are given leave to continue. The steward offers bread hard enough for travel, a strip of smoked fish, and the unmistakable impression that charity has now reached its proper limit. You step out into the yard, where the dog rejoins you after a successful diplomatic mission beneath the kitchen door. The keep stands behind you in torch suit and pale daylight, its high window hiding the lady, the chest, and the small gilded mirror that ties beauty, status, sin, and fear together with a cord finer than silk. The road from the keep descends through fields where winter has flattened the grass and filled every hollow with pale water. Behind you, the stone walls sink into mist, carrying their hidden chest, their turned mirror, and their noble morning rituals back into the private life of the household. Ahead, the pilgrim road bends between hedges and bare orchards, where crows pick at the frozen ground with the grave persistence of monks correcting poor handwriting. You walk beside Odo, your travel bread tucked under your cloak, your fingers stiff around the edge of the wool. The dog ranges ahead, then behind, then ahead again, as if measuring the road by scent and moral uncertainty. A cart creaks somewhere beyond the hedge, the sound slow and complaining. Soon you come upon it, a two-wheeled cart tilted badly in the mud, one wheel sunk to the hub, the other cracked near the rim. A grey donkey stands in the traces with the patient misery of an animal who has seen human planning before. 3 pilgrims stand beside the cart, their cloaks damp, their badges dull in the grey light. One is a broad woman named Agnes with a staff taller than herself. One is a young man with a bandaged thumb and an expression of injured dignity. The third is an older fellow with a fur cap, a sack of onions, and a habit of blaming mud as though it were a personal enemy. No one can quite agree whether the wheel broke because the road was cursed, the cart was overloaded, or the young man insisted he knew a shortcut. The donkey, wisely, offers no testimony. You help because no traveller who has slept in halls and eaten another person's smoked fish can pretend not to see trouble in a ditch. You push at the cart while Odo braces the wheel and Agnes lays planks beneath the rim. Mud sucks at your boots. Your cloak slips. The dog barks encouragement from a safe distance, which is the easiest kind of courage. At last the cart lurches free, then settles again with a groan that says it will go no farther without repair. The older pilgrim produces cord, a small hatchet, and a strip of rawhide. The young man is sent to gather straight branches from the hedge. Agnes opens a sack and shares coarse bread, dried apples, and cheese wrapped in linen. In return, Odo gives a little smoked fish, and you offer what remains of the keep's hard bread. A roadside meal begins, not planned but accepted, because journeys in this world are stitched together from delays. By late afternoon, the sky lowers. There is no reaching the next village before dark, so the pilgrims make camp near a stand of willows beside the road. They gather fallen wood, clear a patch of wet leaves, and coax a fire into being with flint, steel, dry moss, and several muttered prayers. Smoke rises blue and thin. Someone hangs a little iron pot over the flames and stirs pottage from barley, onions, and water. It is plain food, but as the cold deepens, it smells like mercy. You sit on a rolled cloak near the fire, warming your hands. Odo dries his badge. Agnes mends a tear in her sleeve with thick wool thread. The young man wraps his bandaged thumb in cleaner linen after being scolded for touching the donkey's harness and then the bread. Medieval medicine may be uncertain, but even here people understand that dirt has a gift for entering wounds uninvited. As darkness gathers, talk returns, as it always seems to shining things. The old pilgrim in the fur cap says his cousin once broke a mirror on a Thursday and suffered 7 years of quarrels. Agnes says 7 years sounds suspiciously neat, the sort of number storytellers enjoy because it wears a cloak of importance. The old man concedes that it may have been 5 years, or perhaps merely one very long winter. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Still, the cousin's household lost a pig, spoiled a marriage bargain, and had a chimney collapse into the hearth. So everyone agreed the broken mirror had at least been rude. Odo tells of a knight who carried a polished steel mirror under his breastplate, believing it would turn aside envy and arrows alike. Some swear it saved him in battle, others say it only added weight and vanity, and that the knight lived because his horse ran away at the correct moment. Agnes laughs softly at that, threading her needle by firelight. She says many men call cowardice a miracle if they survive long enough. The fire snaps. The dog lifts its head. Shadows move over the willows like dark water. You listen as another tale begins, quieter than the rest. The young man says there is a village near the marshes where no one keeps mirrors, not even polished spoons uncovered after dusk. A bride once looked into a basin on the morning of her wedding and saw herself wearing widow's black. She married anyway, because families had already baked the bread and no one wastes wedding ale over a basin. Her husband died within the year, or left for war, or simply ran off with a miller's daughter. No one can quite agree which version is oldest, but the basin was buried under the church path, and brides step over the place without knowing why. The story fades into the firelight. You think of Belle's warning about pools, the lady's careful glances, Maud's cracked disc, Mistress Avelin's covered glass. Each tale changes in the telling, but each circles the same fear that a reflection may know too much, too soon, too strangely. The pottage is shared in wooden bowls. You eat slowly, tasting smoke, onion, barley, and ash. Overhead, the stars prick through torn cloud. The repaired wheel leans beside the cart, bound with rawhide and hope. In the morning, perhaps it will turn. Perhaps it will split again before the next shrine. Roads, like omens, are rarely polite enough to announce their intentions. Agnes hangs a small charm from the cart rail, a bent nail tied with a red thread. She says iron steadies what is uncertain. The old pilgrim adds a pinch of salt to the fire for luck, though Odo mutters that salt belongs better in soup. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these gestures protect the journey or simply give frightened hands something useful to do. You settle near the fire, cloak around your shoulders, the dog pressed against your boot. The broken cart creaks softly as it cools. Beyond the willows, the road disappears into dark fields. No mirror shines here, no glass waits on a wall, yet the talkers filled the night with reflections, all the same faces in basins, souls in metal, futures in cracked light. You close your eyes only halfway, warmed by the flames, listening to the pilgrims breathe and the old wheel complain quietly in the mud. Morning comes pale and reluctant, as if the sky itself has slept badly beside the broken cart. Frost rims the willow branches, and the roadside fire has fallen into a soft grey heap, breathing one last thread of smoke. You wake with your cloak pulled over your chin, your boots damp at the toes, and the dog curled so tightly against your legs that for a moment you believe you have grown an extra furrier conscience in the night. Around you, the pilgrims stir. Agnes shakes ash from her skirt. The young man tests his bandaged thumb and looks personally betrayed by healing. Odo kneels by the embers, warming his hands before fastening his pilgrim badge. The old pilgrim in the fur cap inspects the repaired cartwheel with the expression of a man judging a confession. The rawhide has stiffened in the cold, the branches hold, and the donkey, after careful thought, appears willing to continue living. You eat a breakfast of coarse bread dipped into yesterday's pottage, now thick enough to stand a spoon upright and perhaps support a small roof. It tastes of smoke, barley, onion, and endurance. Agnes shares dried apples. Odo offers a little ale from a leather flask. Before setting off, he taps his staff 3 times beside the cartwheel, and the old pilgrim adds another pinch of salt beneath the axle. Some swear salt keeps wheels from splitting on unlucky roads. Others say it only makes the mud more flavourful for demons, which seems unnecessarily generous to demons. The road leads back toward the Abbey lands, where the monastery bell you heard before dawn waits somewhere beyond the low hills. You walk in a loose line beside the cart, helping when the wheels sink, pausing when the donkey decides mud is a theological problem. The dog trots beneath the cart, then behind it, then ahead, always just far enough from work to seem thoughtful. By mid-morning, you reach a little chapel standing alone near a crossroads. Its stone walls are patched with limewash, its roof slumps beneath moss, and beside the door hangs a bell no larger than a cooking pot. A laykeeper waits there with a narrow face and a brown cloak, holding a wooden box wrapped in linen. He knows Odo, or claims to, and greets him as if all pilgrims are cousins once they have limped the same roads. Inside the chapel, the air is cold and close. Rushes lie thinly over the floor. A beeswax candle burns before a painted saint whose face has faded into gentle uncertainty. On the altar rests a small reliquary, not gold, not jewelled, but carved wood covered with worn silver leaf, shaped like a little house for something holier than itself. The keeper says it holds a splinter from the staff of a blessed hermit who once healed fever, protected sheep, and rebuked a river for flooding at an inconvenient hour. No one can quite agree whether the hermit truly rebuked the river, or whether the river simply went down after the rain stopped. But the story has travelled better than the facts. The keeper asks if the relic may be carried to the abbey for inspection and blessing, because rumours have begun to gnaw at it. Some say the splinter is genuine, Some say it is from a hedge cut last spring. Some say a rival chapel spread doubt because pilgrims are coins with feet, and coins with feet choose roads carefully. Odo agrees to help carry the box, and because you are already walking with him, the task settles upon you too, as so many medieval duties do quietly, damply, and without a written contract. The reliquary is wrapped in linen and placed inside a leather satchel. Odo carries it first, then passes it to you when the cart needs his shoulder. It is lighter than you expect. That surprises you. Holy things, feared things, costly things, mirrors, relics, iron keys, sealed letters always seem as though they should weigh more than ordinary wood and cloth. Yet the satchel rests against your side with almost no burden at all, which somehow makes it harder to trust. As you walk, the rumours begin again. Agnes says she saw a relic once that sweated fragrant oil during Lent. The old pilgrim says he saw one that healed a woman's stiff hand, though his brother swore the woman had been opening and closing that hand perfectly well when no one looked. The young man asks whether a false relic can still work if the prayer is sincere. Odo frowns at the road. Even now, it is hard to tell whether holiness lives in bone and wood, or in the hope carried toward them by sore-footed people. You think of mirrors then, though no glass shines anywhere nearby. A relic and a mirror are nothing alike, and yet they both ask to be believed carefully. One promises a glimpse of heavenly nearness. The other gives back the face of the earthbound self. One may reveal grace. One may reveal vanity. Both may deceive. Both may comfort. Both may gather stories until the original object nearly disappears beneath them. At a farmstead, you stop for water and a heel of bread. The farmer's wife sees the satchel and asks what lies within. When Odo tells her, she touches the linen through the leather and whispers a prayer for her youngest son, who coughs at night. Then she asks, in the same breath, whether the relic is the true one. Odo says it is being brought to the abbey so wiser men may consider it. This answer pleases no one, but it is honest enough to stand. The woman gives you a small bundle of herbs for the road time, sage, and dried horehound tied with thread. Some swear horehound boiled in ale eases a winter cough. Agnes says it eases the drinker into regretting the taste of horehound. The farmer's wife laughs, and the sound warms the yard more than the weak sun does. By afternoon, the abbey tower rises ahead, square and grey beyond leafless orchards. Its bell begins to ring, slow and steady. The sound spreads over the fields, touching hedges, frozen puddles, crow wings, and your tired shoulders. The satchel rests against your hip. Within it, the doubtful relic remains silent, giving no proof, no scent of roses, no warm pulse of holiness. It is simply there. Brother Martin meets you near the abbey gate, ink on his fingers again, hood pulled close against the wind. His eyes move from Odo's face to the satchel. He does not smile, but his expression softens. He says doubt is not always an enemy of faith. Sometimes it is the broom that sweeps dust from the chapel floor. Odo looks unsure whether this is comforting. The dog sneezes, which is perhaps its view on theology. You pass through the gate into the stone yard where your journey through bells and mirrors began before dawn. The guest house smoke rises blue. Somewhere inside, candles burn. Somewhere in town, Mistress Aveline's covered mirror still waits. You carry the satchel toward the chapel, feeling how the medieval world holds its mysteries close wrapped in linen, turned towards stone, locked in chests, whispered over fires, and trusted just enough to keep walking. Brother Martin leads you across the abbey yard as the day drains into a colourless evening. The stones are slick beneath your boots, and the wind slips through the cloister arches with a soft, needling sound. Behind you, Odo carries the leather satchel more carefully than before, as if the doubtful relic has grown heavier now that monks are nearby to judge it. The dog follows with its torn ear lifted, suspicious of every hooded figure, which is sensible in its way. Monks move quietly, wear dark wool, and keep bells that attack sleep before dawn. Inside the chapel, the reliquary is placed upon a linen cloth beneath 2 beeswax candles. Brother Martin, the lay brother, and an older prior bend over it in low discussion. They do not invite you close. Holy uncertainty, like noble supper, has its proper seating order. You remain near the wall, smelling cold stone, candle smoke, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of incense pressed into the very mortar. The prior unwraps the little wooden shrine, studies the splinter within, and murmurs something too soft to hear. No one can quite agree whether a relic proves itself by miracles, documents, old memory, or the simple stubbornness of belief, and tonight no answer arrives with trumpets. After a while, the satchel is taken away to the sacristy, where iron keys turn in an oak door. Odo looks both relieved and disappointed. A mystery locked away remains a mystery, but at least it no longer hangs from his shoulder. Brother Martin tells you there will be a pallet ready in a small upper guest chamber, since rain is expected again, and the road after dark is no friend to sensible feet. You accept before pride can embarrass you. The chamber lies above the guest house, reached by a narrow stair smelling of dust, old lime wash, and stored apples. A rushlight burns in a wool niche. The room itself is plain a low bed with a wool blanket, a chest, a stool, a peg for your cloak, and a shuttered window whose cracks breathe winter. Fresh rushes lie thinly on the floor, mixed with dried lavender and meadowsweet. It is not luxury, but after ditches, carts, courts, markets, and forest pools. It feels almost dangerous to be horizontal. Then you notice what's missing. There is no polished cup on the shelf, no basin left uncovered, no brass spoon shining by the hearth, for there is no hearth here, only a brazier with dull coals hidden under ash. Even the small iron latch has been wrapped in a strip of cloth so it does not catch candlelight. The water bowl sits under the bed, covered by a wooden trencher. The single window is shuttered tight. Every surface that might answer your face has been quieted. Brother Martin sees your glance and lowers his voice. Some guests sleep better so, he says. Some do not. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether uncovered shine invites dreams, reflects wandering spirits, or merely gives a sleepless traveller something to stare at until his thoughts sour. The abbey has learned, he adds, that a covered basin costs less trouble than a frightened merchant shouting at midnight because his own nose appeared in the dark. He leaves you with a candle stub, perhaps the cousin of the half-burned candle you saw on his desk, and closes the oak door. The latch clicks softly. The dog circles the rushes, sniffs the covered water bowl, approves none of the arrangements, and finally collapses near the bed with a sigh that seems to summarize the whole century. You sit on the edge of the mattress and unlace your boots. Steam rises faintly from the leather. Your socks are damp. Your toes ache. The wool blanket smells of lanolin, smoke, and many travellers who promised themselves they would wake early and almost certainly did not. Outside, the abbey bell rings once, then silence returns in layers. You eat the last of your bread slowly, brushing crumbs into your palm because even crumbs matter on the road. You think of the market's bright table, Maud's cracked mirror, Belle's spoon, the lady's gilded glass, the forest pool, the covered object in Mistress Aveline's house. Here, in this room without reflection, their absence feels almost like another presence. The dark does not show you anything, and for that reason it begins to soothe. Still, the mind keeps polishing its own surfaces. When the candle leans in the draught, you imagine glass under linen. When the window shutter knocks, you imagine water disturbed by a leaf. When the dog dreams and twitches one paw, you imagine the silent bark returning from the pool. Even now, it is hard to tell whether fear lives in objects or in the rooms we build around them. A small custom returns to you from Belle's cottage. Fear can be taught to sit nearer the fire. There is no fire here, but there is the hidden warmth of coals, the weight of wool, the lavender in the rushes, the old abbey stones holding back weather, and the distant murmur of monks chanting somewhere below. So you let the fear sit. You do not feed it with questions. You do not chase it either. You let it become ordinary, like the wind, like wet boots, like the ache in your knees after a long road. The candle burns lower. Wax gathers at its base. Its flame no longer throws strong shadows, only soft ones that lean and fade. The room grows gentle because nothing shines sharply. The covered water bowl stays silent beneath the bed. The wrapped latch does not glimmer. The shutter holds back the night. Your own face, for once, is nowhere to be seen. You lie down. The dog presses against the bed frame. Beneath you, the straw mattress rustles like a field in low wind. Somewhere below, Brother Martin coughs, perhaps over a manuscript, perhaps over doubt. Somewhere beyond the abbey wall, the town sleeps around its veiled mirror, and the widow's house keeps its candles close to the dead. But here, in the draughty chamber, the fear that followed you from gate to alehouse, from court to forest pool, begins to loosen. It does not vanish. Medieval fears rarely vanish. They prefer to become customs. Yet tonight it grows smaller than the wind at the shutters, smaller than the bell in the dark, smaller than the warm, steady breathing of the dog who has chosen you, for reasons no scholar will ever explain. You wake slowly, as though the abbey must persuade you back into the world by degrees. First comes the bell, distant and soft, folded in the stone below. Then comes the smell of lavender in the rushes, peat ash from the brazier, damp wool drying over the stool, and the faint animal warmth of the dog asleep near the bed frame. The chamber remains dim. Grey morning presses at the shutters, but no clear light enters. For a few breaths, you lie without moving, held between dream and day, where even a poor pallet can feel like mercy. The covered water bowl waits beneath the bed. The wrapped latch does not glimmer. The candle stub beside you is burned almost to its end, leaving a little mound of wax on the stool. You remember Brother Martin's caution. Bells, herbs, Odo's staff tapping crossroads, the lady's gilded mirror locked in oak, Maud's cracked disc wrapped for the smith, the forest pool smoothing itself after your face left it. All of them gather here, in this small room where nothing shines. No one can quite agree whether the fear of mirrors begins with souls, vanity, death, prophecy, witchcraft, grief, or simple unease at seeing oneself made separate. Perhaps that is because it begins with all of them. In this world, the border between object and omen is thin. A bell is not only metal, it is a voice against storms and spirits. A candle is not only wax, it is prayer, light, and time melting visibly. Salt is not only seasoning, it is protection beneath a bed, blessing in a pocket, a white line against rot and bad luck. So a mirror cannot be only glass. It shines too strangely to be innocent. You rise and splash your hands from the covered bowl, lifting the trencher only long enough to use the water and then covering it again, more from courtesy than conviction. The water is cold enough to bite. In its brief tremble, you catch not a face, only movement. That is enough. You dress slowly, pulling on stiff boots and fastening your cloak with fingers that still remember yesterday's rain. The dog wakes, stretches, and yawns as though it has dreamed through every theological dispute and settled them all in favour of breakfast. Downstairs, the guest house is already stirring. A lay brother sweeps old rushes toward the door with a birch broom. Another carries coarse loaves from the bakehouse, where oven smoke curls beneath the eaves. Odo sits near the hearth with his cloak around his shoulders, warming his hands over a cup of small ale. Brother Martin stands by the table, ink-stained again, breaking bread with the careful attention of a man who knows crumbs matter. The doubtful relic is not mentioned at first. It has been locked away for judgment, and perhaps judgment, like bread dough, needs time to rise. You eat with them coarse bread, pottage warmed from last night's pot, a strip of smoked fish, and ale thin enough to be humble. Outside, carts begin to creak along the road. A woman crosses the yard with eggs tucked in straw. The abbey hens scratch near the wall, utterly unconcerned with souls, mirrors, and holy splinters. Their confidence is enviable, if a little loud. Brother Martin asks if you slept. You say yes, mostly. He nods, as if mostly is all anyone should expect from a medieval bed. Then he speaks of mirrors again, not as a warning this time, but as though setting down a tool after long use. He says people fear what returns their gaze without truly knowing them. A saint's painted eyes promise intercession. A friend's eyes carry warmth. A priest's eyes may judge, but they are human. A mirror gives back sight without mercy, without memory, without love. It shows the old their age, the vain their hunger, the grieving their loneliness, the sick their fragility, and the guilty the face that must carry guilt into daylight. Some swear that mirrors trap souls, some swear they open doors, some swear they foretell death, reveal devils, invite pride, or confuse the dead. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these stories are errors or lanterns. Perhaps a tale does not need to be factually neat to show where people are afraid. In a hard world of fevers, failed harvests, wet winters, sudden loss, and narrow rooms, fear looks for a shape. A mirror offers one bright, silent, fragile, and almost alive. Odo touches the shell badge on his cloak. He says pilgrims carry relics, badges, charms, and prayers because the road is long and the heart prefers company. Mirrors, he adds, give a person company of a colder kind. The dog rests its chin on your boot, either agreeing or hoping your breakfast has become unstable. Brother Martin gives it a crumb, which proves that even suspicious monks may be trained by patient animals. Later, you walk with Odo to the abbey gate. The morning has softened, the rain has ended, though the mud remains, because mud is the most faithful resident of any medieval road. Beyond the wall, the town roofs smoke under a pale sky. Somewhere inside those walls, Mistress Aveline's mirror will stay covered until the burial. Maud's cracked disc may already be on its way to the smith. The market merchant may be unwrapping his bright goods again. The lady in the keep may glance briefly into her gilded glass before turning toward duties older than beauty. Belle of the Lane may be boiling herbs, scolding fear, and reminding someone to change the straw before blaming demons. You stand beneath the gate arch and understand, not perfectly, but gently. Medieval people fear mirrors because they live among signs. They read weather in bones, morality in illness, holiness in relics, danger in dreams, and warning in accidents. They do not have the luxury of calling the world merely material. Every object may carry meaning, every shine may be a message, every reflection may be a question asked too close to the soul. And perhaps, if you are honest, the fear is not wholly gone from later hearts either. Even now, a dark window at night can startle. A face in black water can feel like a stranger. A mirror in a lonely room can make silence seem occupied. The old fear survives because it belongs not only to the Middle Ages, but to the strange experience of being a person who can look at oneself and still not fully know what is looking back. The abbey bell rings again. Odo adjusts his pack. The dog steps through the gate first, naturally, as if appointed guide by powers wiser than monks and less organised than kings. You follow into the soft morning mud, carrying no mirror, no relic, no answer polished bright enough to end the matter. Only bread in your pouch, wet wool at your hem, smoke in your hair, and a quieter understanding folded somewhere beneath your cloak. The road opens before you, pale and rutted, and the world settles into its old rhythm. Bells behind you, fields before you, a crow over the hedge, a cartwheel groaning somewhere beyond the bend, perhaps whole, perhaps cracked, certainly complaining. You walk on, and with every slow step, the fear of shining things becomes less like a threat and more like a tale told beside a winter fire, meant not to frighten you awake, but to remind you how carefully people once moved through darkness. Now the journey grows softer, the road no longer asks for hurry. The town wall fades behind mist, the abbey bell thins into memory, and the last candle of the story burns low in some quiet room where the rushes smell of lavender and smoke. You feel the wool blanket over your shoulders, the warmth of the hearth near your feet, the steady breathing of the dog curled close by, and the gentle hush that comes when even old fears have said all they need to say. The mirror is covered now. The basin is still. The forest pool lies under branches, holding only stars and the slow drift of clouds. No face leans from it. No whisper rises from the glass. There is only the small, kind darkness of a sleeping world, with shutters closed against the cold and a loaf wrapped for morning on the table. So let the road fall away. Let the mud dry on distant boots. Let the bells become softer, farther, fewer. You are safe beside the fire. The old stones hold. The night outside is deep, but it is no longer asking anything of you. It simply rests around the room, blue and quiet, while the candle gives one last golden tremble and settles into a warm bead of light. Breathe slowly. Let the medieval world dim like embers under ash. Let the covered mirror keep its secrets until dawn. Let your thoughts grow still, your hands grow warm, and your eyes grow heavy. Nothing follows you now but sleep, soft-footed and patient, coming down the road at last.